Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. We'll give folks a minute or two to join.
Welcome, everybody.
Hello, hello.
Anyways, I don't know if I can see who's in the audience.
No, you can't with this system. So, welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. My name is Mallory. I am a co-founder of the Inheritance Project, along with Ariel, my partner in life and work.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hey, Ivan.
You may be here if you are maybe struggling with a conflict in your workplace, perhaps a issue with a boss, an investor, a co-founder of your company or organization, or maybe you're here because you are excited to learn ways to enrich or improve your relationships with your family and your personal life. And if that's the case, I'd love to see in the comments if either of those two reasons resonate with you, or if there's another reason why you're here, maybe because you just know us personally and are curious to hear what's going on in our lives these last couple of years. I'd love to hear in the comments what drew you to join us on this Wednesday lunchtime.
You also might be here if you just read the headlines and you have a crush on somebody at work and you're like, all right, give me the scoop. What do I need to know? But I don't know how helpful that'll be per se. But we will talk about cross these dual relationship dynamics in depth.
And before we get into that, I want to share a bit about Inheritance Project and who we are. And when I say inheritance, I don't mean just physical property or money or assets that get handed down from one generation to the next. Contrary to what some people might think at first glance, we do not do estate planning or taxes for wealthy families. Actually, when we say inheritance at Inheritance Project, we mean everything that we've inherited that shape us, that came into our lives or into who we are kind of outside of our control. So those may be stories, beliefs, ideas, identities, culture, ways of seeing the world, ways that we were taught to behave either consciously or unconsciously by our families, our caretakers, by the wider society at large. Inheritance is not just biological from our direct families. We inherit so much from the context that we grew up in. And what we do is provide leadership development, team building, and inclusion programming to teams and communities to help people unpack all of these different, often invisible aspects of what we inherited that really shape the way that we show up at work, in relationships, especially in the way that we communicate and deal with conflict. Right now, we're working in the US with, the most diverse, multicultural workforces we've ever had. How do we actually create environments where we truly understand and know how to work with people who come from all different inheritances, all different contexts? And so often the barriers to creating those kinds of work cultures, to creating that kind of leadership, is unconscious beliefs and behaviors that we inherited. So that's a part of why we're here having this conversation today, because the nature of our relationship has forced both of us in different ways to come face to face with some of the things that we inherited that were holding us back as both leaders and as partners too. And I want to pass it over to you, Ariel, to share a bit more. Why are we here? Why do we think that it's important to be having this conversation on LinkedIn today?
Well, I was thinking a lot recently. I was on vacation this last couple of days and had some space to think, and this this kind of phrase kept coming up that um, the quality of our this concept that the quality of our relationships is the quality of our lives, and this is not a new concept, but um, I also started thinking about this idea of resilience and what makes an organization resilient, um, being as that is kind of how the reason we're kind of brought into an organization to help them become more resilient, and it's really about relationships. And right now we're moving through a period in history where the world is changing really fast, and that has ramifications for our economic stability, how AI is changing the way we work, you name it. And the strength of our relationships at work is is the basis on which you will either thrive in that environment, where you will remain kind of average, remain kind of just getting by, or ultimately fail. Because right now, all of these factors that are causing change, they put stress, they put challenges on on our organizations, and those that have relationships that can hold that tension and turn those challenges into um, allow those to be constructive, those are the ones um, that will ultimately succeed and be able to go through the changes. Think about if an organization is changing its leadership, or if it's merging with another organization, or if it's incorporating a whole new technological way of working, and people's jobs are changing. So this idea that our relationships are really one of the most important factors of the health of an organization is something that's really important, and that's been um, that's one of the main things that's come out of my work in in our organization. um, and I think, to start off the conversation, I think one of the reasons, aside from all those factors, um, this has been a very different relationship, obviously, than any that I've had before. And I think that because we have this dual relationship, there's really no place to hide. you know there's nowhere to hide. Like, if our relationship at work is reflected in our relationship at home, and vice versa. So we don't have the option to, uh, you know, a disagreement in the office, and then come back and just like put it on the, leave it there, because the office is often our living room. and and so what that meant is that the amount of integrity with which we've had to show up has completely changed, and um, you're no longer allowed to play the same kind of games, and to play the same, and to be passive aggressive, or to be um, to basically not have integrity in any part of the relationship. So a lot of lessons and a lot of learning has come out of this, and has changed both the way that I work and the way that I am in relationships. And so that's two of the reasons we wanted to share some of those lessons and learnings. Oh, hold on, Mal, you're on mute.
Thank you. I was just saying, so let's get into it. I would love to hear what's one change that you've made, either in the way that you show up at work, or in the way that you lead, or in intimate romantic relationships, as a result of being in this partnership and creating together in this way.
Hmm. Um, I think one of the things that has come about in my journey with Inheritance Project is um, that before, I had a tendency to not ask for help, and that my tendency was to really try to do things on my own, um, because I wanted to show up and project that that I had things under control, and that I was capable, and that I didn't want to, I saw Mallory stressed out, Katya stressed out. I don't want to bring them into unnecessary meetings and take more of their time. Um, and, a lot of that was on the surface, well-intentioned, wanting to show up in the best way that I could. But what ended up happening was that by not getting input sooner, by not getting the right input sooner, by not communicating uh, as best as possible when there were challenges that I needed help with, a lot of the projects that I was working on, some of them ended up getting stalled. Some of them ended up having major complications that could have been avoided. And what I what I realized was that I had to work in a different way, and I had to call on the support of my teammates, um, and in a much more robust way. And because we have the kind of in part because of the dual relationship, and also in part because of the space that we created as a co-founding team, I was able to see that a lot of that was around a lot of my resistance to getting more support was really about my insecurities, about not wanting to not appear that I don't know what I'm doing, or wanting to not be seen making all kinds of different mistakes. And so I think that's been a major learning, and that learning has come out of us bringing a lot of these tools from relationship into our workplace, and creating environments where um, one, seeing that it's necessary to ask for support when you need it, because that's ultimately good leadership. Leaders don't lead by themselves. And two, creating an environment that could hold that, and that could make it okay for us to make mistakes, and to ask for help, and to normalize that. And that's made a complete shift in how I show up as a leader in the work that we do.
Mm. Thanks for sharing that. And I usually don't like to make broad generalizations about gender, but I do think there is a certain element of gender conditioning here, which we all receive in different ways from society. Some of the stories about men should always be strong, should always have the answers, should take on more of the burden, should not. I think especially because of the nature of our relationship, am I right in saying that perhaps those ideas were stronger for you, and were contributing also to some of those patterns?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I think part of it maybe was I think part of it is gendered. I think men are socialized to be more stoic, and to suck it up and deal with their and not bring their problems to the table. And for me, this didn't occur to me, because I've done tons of therapy, and I've done men's work, and I've been a teacher, working with students and in all female spaces, and I'm a yogi, and there was definitely a part of me that was just completely blind to that, and did not see that part of how I'd been conditioned. But I will also go on to say that this kind of toxic, kind of masculine approach to leadership is also normalized in in work culture in general. So I think that may be true, that that came out because that's been more of my socialization. But in regular work cultures, women go through the same thing. Women also show up in corporate environments in the same way, and want to project strength, and kind of hide weakness, or hide the need to ask for help as well. So, but yeah, I would say that there's a deep process of deconditioning that needs to happen
Yeah,
in that respect.
I think I also have been made aware by you, and by the nature of our relationship over the last couple of years, of how many blind spots I have or had to. Because I think that I used to have a story about myself similarly I've been doing yoga for 10 years. I meditate almost every day. I think I had a reputation at my old corporate job for being someone who's really great at being calm under pressure, who can handle high stakes situations, who's great at talking to clients who are unhappy and dealing with those kinds of things. And I was really great in that environment. But now, in this context where my coworker, my partner is also my romantic partner, it brought up a whole different intense level of emotion and reactivity that I didn't realize was inside me. And an example, one of the things that I've been working on deconditioning is that I definitely inherited from society and work culture at large is this sense of urgency, and that time is money and we need to do things quickly. The worst possible crime you could make is missing a deadline. And so I had this deep sense of urgency and impatience around me. And that would, and something I now really value about Ariel, but took me a while to appreciate, is that he is so thoughtful, so deliberate, and incredibly caring in everything that he does. That's one of the reasons why our programs are so powerful and we get constantly, amazing feedback from our clients, is because he puts such thought and care into every single aspect of the experience. And there was a part of me that just didn't appreciate that. That was like, well, this is behind the deadline, let's go. And would get really, frustrated and reactive in a way that I hadn't ever behaved in a professional context. I used to think, oh, I'm so calm at work, like nothing bothers me. And I found myself getting really bothered a lot of the time. And at first was really frustrated, and my orientation was to blame him and be like, well, he's being too slow. He's doing this, he's doing that. Like all of my feelings are his fault. And, over time really realized that, oh no, this is an invitation for me to look inside at, like, why am I having these reactions? Where is this really coming from? Is this the kind of workplace that I want to create? I left corporate America because I wanted to create something different and to create a new paradigm of working with other humans in a way that feels holistic and integrated and human-centered and caring. And yet there I was behaving in a way that was the opposite of that, even though those were my conscious intentions. And I really, again, it was revealed to me, this unconscious programming that I've received from society that was operating within me, making me react to this way. And so one of the greatest gifts and lessons that I'm so grateful for is learning patience, and also learning how to make space for different people's styles and needs. And I think this is true in the workplace and also in personal relationships. Like everyone is really different, processes information in different ways, works most effectively in different ways. Ariel and I are probably polar opposites ends of the spectrum. I'm usually best if I don't prepare too much. I love having ideas in the moment. That's when I feel most inspired. I love to talk things out. And he is someone who can provide such deep and thoughtful insights when he has space and time to reflect alone individually, and a lot of space and time to prepare. So that's one area where we're really different. And a lot of the typical workplace norms favor my style of communicating and interacting, and that I, in my corporate career, was rewarded for thinking quickly on my feet, for being able to improvise really well. And so I kind of had the orientation, oh, well, everyone just needs to conform to my way of doing things. I would never have said that consciously, but that's what was underneath. And actually, what I've learned is that by doing that or having that unconscious orientation, I was actually missing out on the incredible gifts and insights and details that Ariel is able to offer. And I was not doing a good job as a leader, setting up our meetings, our way of working, our cadence, really tactical things like sending agendas and things to review in advance of us meeting so that he would have time to reflect and think about it before we talked. Giving space in the meeting for each person to silently reflect and write down their thoughts and have a really intentional time for each person to share rather than having an unstructured conversation. These are all really practical tools that we teach in part of our inclusive leadership training that we developed in part because the three of us on our founding team have very different cognitive styles, ways of working, neurodivergence, and we had to figure out a way of creating an environment that really worked for all of our needs. And the same is true in relationships. Some people need more alone time. Some people need, more time to be together in certain ways. And so often in relationships, we have this unconscious assumption that, well, the other person just needs to conform to my way of doing things, or like what's wrong with them that they need different things to me. We may not think that consciously, but that's often the undertone. And I've really been forced to understand, like, what does it mean to truly be an inclusive leader where you create an environment where every single person's needs are met. And sometimes that requires being really creative. Like, it's not your way versus my way, but what's the third way where each of us can be able to be in our genius zone and contribute in the way that's best.
I think that what something that's coming to mind is the difference is kind of the shift of mentality. And I think, just to reiterate what you're saying, there's a shift from what do I need to get the job done to how can I serve the team best, and how can I serve the success of us as a group. And I think that this kind of speaks to the main learning of what came out of this relationship for me was like thinking about it like I was saying earlier, like, how can we meet our relationships as if, for example, our boss was taking care of your relationship with your boss as if he was your roommate, meaning that anything that you did, during the day, that energy is going to come and be part of your home life. Or conversely, as a leader, imagine that you showed up as a leader in such a way that the way that you treat that you were that the people in your care, in your team, were also living in your community, and that everything you do would have a ramification in both worlds. And if all of us showed up to our relationships in that way, we'd treat them completely differently. We wouldn't be condescending. We wouldn't be we wouldn't think of ways to win the argument. We'd think about ways to take care of the relationship and find the best solution. Mm-hmm. So I think this move from independent to interdependent is really, really important, and kind of is one of the major shifts that that I learned having this dual relationship dynamic.
The shift from independence to interdependence was huge for me too, because I used to be very much into being an independent woman. I was successful in my career. I had a really well-paying job, and I also didn't really like to ask people in my life for help or support. I went through something similar to you, but in a different way of really realizing. And I was also working in an environment where my performance was sort of assessed on an individual basis. Even though I would be part of projects and teams, ultimately, at the year end, it was my performance. What had I done? That would determine whether I'd be promoted or not. So it was a more individualistic model. And I didn't realize how much that affected me, even though, again, consciously, I had these values of interdependence and community care and all of these things. I really became aware through our relationship dynamic of how much I had been programmed to do things individually, and how I needed to really let go of control a lot, and let go of doing things my way in order to create something that is in service for the group. And something that our other co-founder, Katya, often says is, you can go fast alone, but you get to go far together. And it looks like we lost Ariel. Maybe this conversation was too much for him. Hopefully he is able to sort out his tech situation and join us. Let me just send him a message. Oh, looks like he's back.
Sorry about that. Looks like I got kicked off.
So I want to shift the conversation a little bit and talk about boundaries between work and life, because we live and work together in a New York City apartment. We're very lucky that it's a very spacious New York City apartment with a backyard. But even so, I think this isn't just relevant to couples who, work together or have businesses together, but for anyone in a relationship, it's so easy with the pressures of modern life for your relationship to devolve into just a conversation about logistics, and you're just doing household chores, taking care of taking care of the kids, organizing schedules, and it's very, very easy for the work of life and maintaining a home and maintaining a family to, overtake your relationship. So would you be open to sharing some of the things that we've learned over the last couple of years about how to maintain those healthy boundaries to take care of our work relationship and also our personal relationship?
Yeah, definitely. The first thing that comes to mind is, well, not only do we work together, we also live together, and we work from home. So it's really easy for those things to blend and bleed into each other. And so something early on that that we adopted was to be very specific about timing. So for example, when we talk about work and when we don't talk about work. And at a certain point in the evening, that's like the cutoff, and like no work questions after that. If Mallory wants to work till 7 o'clock because she needs to get something done, or if I need to, you know, work at something super early in the morning, like at that certain time, that's the cutoff. And we create that separation very intentionally. The other thing is, if you do want to ask a question, you need to get consent and say, so like, if I have a question for Mallory, asking her like, is this a good time? Is this a good time? Can I ask you a work related question about XYZ? And this is like really, really important. It's also one of the things that's talked about in a lot of literature around um, uh, effectiveness at work. Basically, if you have people coming in every 5 minutes and asking you a question, you'll never get work done. So like blocking off time where you're like unavailable, and so that can initially seem kind of hurtful and kind of resentful, but if that's the established norms, then it really creates an environment where you can be effective. Um, the other part of that is for the person who's being asked to actually really consider whether they can engage in that way in that moment. So I think in the first year of our relationship, which is the second year of our business, Mallory would say, "Hey, do you have a moment for this question?" And I would say yes, without really checking in with myself. And then we'd get into a half an hour discussion, and then I'd be resentful later. So there's a lot about consent there, and that's related to like the work aspect. In terms of the relationship, and making sure that that's healthy, in terms of boundaries. Another thing that's really important is to create time and space, for us as a couple, and for us as life partners. So like making space to go on dates, making space to take a walk by the river where we don't talk about work. Um, Making sure that we each have our alone time, making sure that that we just have clear boundaries and keep those boundaries around when we talk about work and when we don't. Um, Other things, I'll pose the question back
I
to you.
Well, I think what your story about the asking each other questions, which sounds like such a little thing, but was actually the source of a lot of tension and frustration between us at certain points, um, that we really had to work through. And I really learned that, or I'm still in the process of learning how to really understand my own needs, and then how to actually be honest with the person that I'm in relationship with about my capacity. And I definitely inherited a lot of conditioning, on people pleasing and feeling like in order to succeed, I have to say yes to everything. And this was definitely rewarded in the earlier work environments that I worked in, being able to just say yes to everything, even if you don't really have capacity to do it well, and overextend yourself and get sick and burnt out. This is so common in our workplaces. And it was a real shift in orientation for me to think about it instead. Okay, now we're creating our own business, our own way of life. We don't need to follow any of those rules anymore. What do I really need to thrive and do my best work? What kind of schedule serves me? I learned that I need to have deep work time in the morning where I don't have meetings until 11 a.m. and I can just do, writing or things that I need that require, or, planning for facilitations, that require a lot more thought and care. And I really don't like to be interrupted during that, that time. And
That's true.
I used to do the same thing where Ariel would be like, "Hey, do you have 5 minutes for this?" And I would say yes, because that's how I was conditioned, because that's what was the norm in previous workplaces that I worked in. Like, you don't say no if your, boss is coming over to ask you a question, even if it's really disruptive to you and what you're working on. And so I was doing that and getting angry and resentful and frustrated. And it would come out in our personal life. And, I would make comments about other things that were hurtful or mean. And I started, reflecting and seeing, wait, I don't want to be treating my partner this way. Where is this really coming from? And all that anger was coming from me not being in integrity with my own needs. And I think this is true in relationships and work, and it's true in romantic personal relationships too. And for me, the first thing was actually being aware of what I needed. So, like you said, taking time to actually check in with myself and breathe, connect with my body, and say, wait, do I have capacity for this right now? That's the first step, is awareness. And then secondly, for me, was building the courage to actually say what I needed, even if I had a fear that it would make the other person uncomfortable or upset. And that's been another one of my huge learnings and growth as a leader, is to be able to speak my truth in our relationship and in our work in a compassionate way, because I definitely used to have more of a conflict avoidant tendency where I would just say yes to things that I felt were wrong or not good for me or not right, because I just didn't want to deal with conflict, or I was so afraid, you being my, not just my coworker, but also my partner, I was so afraid of hurting you or making you feel rejected or any of these things, that I wouldn't be in integrity with myself. And I've come to learn that actually being in integrity with myself creates much more harmony in the relationship. And I had a fear of creating disharmony by, saying no, setting a boundary, disagreeing with you. And that, caused a lot of turmoil inside me that came out in really unhealthy ways. And it was coming from a place of fear of, somehow our relationship being damaged by me being truthful about what I really need. And it's, I still have more work to do on this, but it's one area where I've also realized that a lot of those fears are my own stories and ideas and inherited ideas about how other people respond that weren't often the case. Like, for example, earlier this year, I was dealing with a lot of health issues, and I was so afraid to ask Ariel and Katya for time off to really focus on healing and getting better. And because I was so afraid that they would think I was not committed or that I wasn't pulling my weight and I didn't want to be a burden and all of these stories, when in reality, they really care about me and my long-term ability to contribute to our work, which I can't do if I'm sick. So the way they reacted was so different and so supportive and loving compared to, you know, the idea that I had in my head about how they would react. And so if, yeah, you're listening to this and thinking, well, but my boss would never be okay with XYZ, or my partner would never, you know, allow me to do this or accept this need that I have, then I just invite you to question and reflect if that's really true, or if that is your own story or idea based on past relationships, past conditions, and perhaps opening up the possibility that yeah, they might actually have a different reaction to your than the one you have in your story, which is at least what I found in my life, that I wasn't even giving Ariel or other people in my life the opportunity to even support me or show up for me in the way that I wanted, because I wasn't voicing what I needed.
Can I ask, well, question to you. I think this is probably one of the most potent and juicy topics for anybody, whether you're in a relationship or not, is how to handle disagreements. And what are some of the things that, what are some of the things that came out of your experience in this dual relationship that, um, that have been really, really helpful in navigating disagreements at work and at home?
One is noticing my own inherited nervous system reactions to disagreement. So, like I said, I definitely have or inherited more people pleasing tendencies and the fawning response to conflict. So, wanting to placate everyone and make everything okay. And that was really revealed to me by the nature of our work and our relationships. And I just started on building my awareness of that and noticing, so a biggest thing for me is, before reacting or just saying yes or just agreeing to something, is actually taking a pause and breathing, resetting my nervous system, and actually contemplating what would be best. So that's on one side. And then another inherited reaction I would also show up for me in different contexts is the fight reaction. And I think this came from working in an intense, fast-paced corporate environment where I was often felt like, because of the hierarchy and the dynamics, I had to fight for my voice to be heard, and always had to be inserting myself and bringing a perspective and advocating for myself in order to be seen and to be appreciated. And I noticed this kind of fight energy would come up when, Ariel would present a different idea to me, or something that I initially disagreed with. And my first reaction would be, well, these are all the reasons why my idea is right, and we should go with my idea. And I, over time was reflecting like, whoa, that's so limiting. I'm missing out on all the great, I wasn't really able to listen to your ideas and perspective in the past sometimes, because I was so worried about my own voice and my own ideas being heard. And so I had to learn to pause, and instead of being so concerned about getting my perspective out there, actually learn to listen and receive an idea that was really different to what I had in mind, and contemplate, okay, what's good about that? And, this is really hard. Like, it sounds like simple, basic advice, like yeah, listen to the other person's perspective before you advocate for your own. It sounds so simple, but in the moment, because of the conditioning of our nervous system, it can be really hard to do that because those reactions are unconscious. And for many of us, they helped us survive or thrive in the past. And so it can be really hard to notice and catch yourself when you're coming to conflict in ways that are not of service to the present moment. And so for me, it's been really coming back to this truth and this realization that I've had over and over again, that it's not a zero-sum game. It's not your way or my way, and I have to fight for my way. It's both and. How can we create a solution that brings the best from both of what we're offering, and that also cares for both of our needs? And that requires some creativity, and it requires us to be flexible and open and let go of some attachments to certain ideas. But literally every single time that I've engaged in this way, we've found a solution that's so much better than either one of ours separate. And it's something that I really think starts on this micro level in our relationships with our partner, with our families, with our coworker. But this mentality, I think, can bring about a huge shift in our society. What if, all politicians were operating from this both and mentality? Okay, what if we bring the best of your ideas and my ideas and create something even better for the collective? What if we were, operating this way in our organizations, in our companies? We would save so much time arguing with each other and instead use all that energy for creativity, for innovation, for creating the new. And so, yeah, that's been a big shift in mindset and orientation for me, is shifting from my way or your way to both and let's find the third better way. And I'm curious for you to answer the same question before we open up to Q&A from the audience. So if you have any questions for us, now is a great time to put them in the comments so we can make space to reflect on them.
I think the first thing that comes to mind, I want to say two things. And the first one is similar to when wanting to get feedback. You have to get consent. Same thing. Like, is now a good time to have this discussion? And half the time it's not going to be the right time. Because that person may be because Mallory may be activated. She may still have hurt feelings about something that happened. She may have some other things going on. You have to ask if is now an okay time to talk about this. If not, when would be a good time to talk about this? And part of that is so that you can show up to the conversation with the ability to not try to be in the orientation of finding solutions that can be best for the whole. They can be best for the relationship. They can be best for the initiative or the company, and not how can I win this argument based on what I think I know in this moment. So asking for consent, finding the right time is really practical, really essential thing. And actually, that's something that I learned a long time ago in a relationship seminar by this really famous relationship therapist. But the other thing that I think I've learned in our relationship and being in a business relationship with you and Katya is to take radical responsibility. And that means that when you do something wrong or when you have contributed to an issue in some way, you own it 100%. If you're not doing that, you're not taking care of the relationship, and you won't be able to move forward. And I would even go further than that and say that when somebody else has done something wrong, when somebody else has hurt you or has done something out of integrity, that you always acknowledge how you contributed to that situation. So if for example, Mallory has been just barging into my work time and asking me questions and bothering me and saying, Ariel, do you have a time? Do you have a moment to talk about work? And she's doing this all the time. And I'm saying, okay, I can talk about work. And then later I'm pissed off because she's been interrupting my work time. How have I contributed to that? Have I been saying yes when I actually didn't have the time? Like always looking for ways. How did I create the conditions that led to that? How did I create the conditions in the relationship that led to that? So if you are in a habit of always taking ownership and always taking responsibility and always saying how you have contributed to that situation, then you move out of this back and forth dynamic and you create a culture of taking full ownership and finding solutions. And so this is something that was necessitated by us being in this dual relationship where we couldn't leave work problems at the door and we couldn't leave relationship problems at home. They were constantly intermingling. So it was out of necessity that we said, how can I always take responsibility? How can I always understand and talk about and take ownership of how I've contributed? And that is something that if you have in your work culture, if that becomes normalized, then conflict completely changes. Conflict then becomes not something that creates the deterioration of relationships, but creates the foundation for strengthening them and finding the best solutions that are available.
And I think that orientation is really supported by having an interdependent or having an interdependent worldview, because I think about a lot of the environments I used to go into as a corporate consultant, and it was literally the opposite of everyone taking radical responsibility. It was what people called CYA culture, cover your ass, like everyone trying to blame anyone else for the problem so that they wouldn't get blamed for it and potentially punished, potentially fired or not promoted. And so, when everyone's operating out of that fear-based, survival-based mentality, it's so easy to be looking to blame other people. And this shows up at work and it shows up in our relationships. And so taking radical responsibility is very powerful, and it's not easy because there's so much conditioning and fear and survival strategies that are deeply programmed into us that we inherited that get in the way of that sometimes. And so we've all, had to really look in the mirror, and especially you and I, to say, what are the ways where I think I'm taking radical responsibility, but I'm still subconsciously blaming you for the situation. Because I think the other thing that happens when you work on a team of facilitators and people who teach conscious communication is that sometimes we're really good at performing the right thing to say when underneath we're still fuming or raging or blaming. And so taking radical responsibility is not just saying the right thing and saying that, it's also taking ownership of the emotions that I feel in this moment and saying, okay, I'm still feeling angry and hurt about this. What do I need to do to take care of myself? Maybe I need to not have this conversation right now, or I need to go to a yoga or dance class or do something that shifts my state and makes me feel uplifted before I can come back and bring a clear mind and an open heart to this conversation. And go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it's really best practice for leadership. And this kind of motto of, as a leader, when something goes wrong, you take the blame, you take ownership. And when something goes right, you give away the credit. That's something my best friend says. And he works in a government organization where it's like the textbook classic toxic work culture, toxic masculine culture. And because he has come to the table as a leader with that perspective of, when something goes wrong, take the blame. When something goes right, give away the credit. Everybody wants to work for him. Everybody shows up with their best. That's how you create trust. That's how you create a culture of accountability, when the leader shows up in that way. So I just wanted to share that nugget as well.
Thank you. And we are going to answer any questions that either of you have for us. We're a pretty open book. So if you have questions, please put them in the comments. And before we do that, I want to share a bit more about our upcoming inclusive leadership and conflict resolution course. We talked a bit about some of the techniques and orientation that we have in order to turn conflict into an opportunity for not just improving the relationship, but for creativity too, for finding the best innovative path forward. And if you're, dealing with a particular conflict that's keeping you up at night, maybe it's a tension with one of your coworkers or your boss or a really important stakeholder in your organization, or maybe it is a conflict with your co-founder or partner in business or your investor that is really challenging you and you're not able to find a solution that works for both of you, or maybe you're dealing with some long-standing conflicts in your family. You find it really hard to go home for Thanksgiving and talk about politics with your family members, for example. That's something that we hear a lot. And you want more practical skills and tools for how do you actually engage with people who might come from really different backgrounds, really different ideas and ways of seeing the world. And actually, instead of that leading to conflict that damages and harms the relationship, that actually you can as a leader, whether you're leading at work or at home and in your family, you can turn that into an opportunity for a deeper understanding, for greater collaboration. And this, over the course of the 10 weeks of this program, which starts in mid-September, you'll be learning 7 skills for challenging conversations, because every relationship, the foundation of every relationship is built on conversations and communication. And these skills are applicable to every type of relationship and conversation you might have, whether it is giving really hard feedback to a team member or boss, and or sharing about ways that another person has hurt you or that you've received a microaggression, or if it's telling someone no or setting a boundary, or sharing a different point of view about something really important. All of those are really hard conversations that a lot of us face all the time, and we're never taught in a formal way how to have those conversations in the most powerful and effective way that leads to better outcomes for everyone. So that will be the core of the course, is learning those 7 skills. And not only that, but looking at and unpacking the ways that your inheritance, the situations and contexts that you were raised in, that you've worked in the past, may be carrying with you patterns of communicating, of dealing with conflict that aren't serving this particular situation, aren't serving how you want to show up as a leader right now. And you'll have the opportunity to put these skills into practice and really get support and live coaching throughout the program to actually start to transform the way that you relate and communicate. Because like we've shared a lot of today, some of these ideas can sound really beautiful and easy, but when it actually comes to putting them into practice, it takes a lot of time and energy and intention to transform some of these deeply ingrained inherited patterns in our nervous system that come out before we even have a chance to think about it or reflect. So if you want to join this program, you'll have a community of people who are working towards evolving the way they lead and communicate and deal with conflict and deal with differences of perspective. And you'll be part of that community. And this is something that's I'm personally really passionate about because of what's happening in our broader society. Right now, we're at a huge time of transition. and change. Obviously, COVID happened, AI, technology is changing, the very foundation of our economy is being called into question. And a lot of the organizations that exist right now were built on a model that was made for the 19th and 20th centuries. A lot of our organizations were actually modeled on a military structure that's very hierarchical, top-down, command-based structure that may work really well for running a factory, for example, but in the type of work that we're doing in the knowledge-based workforce, in the tech-based workforce, in the ways that our society and our culture are evolving to be more collaborative and human-centered, that traditional militaristic hierarchical way of leading is no longer serving. And it's time for all of us to look at the ways that we have inherited some of those tendencies and be really intentional about the way that we're leading, because the leadership that's required for the rest of the 21st century, for the challenges that you're probably dealing in your life, in your organization, they're more complex than ever. They require so much more buy-in and support from many different stakeholders and communities. They require us to work together across lines of difference in really different ways. We're not going to get to the future that we need to create as humanity if we continue down the line of partisan conflict. We really need to learn different ways of leading. And so that's what we're doing, is creating a community of evolutionary leaders who are going to be the leaders of this new way of being and creating in the world and solving some of humanity's toughest problems. So if this sounds like something that you want to be a part of, the time to sign up is now. We'll put all the information in the comments, including a discount code for $100 off for being part of this conversation and joining this live. And the other thing I want to say is that the early bird price of $1,550 for this 10-week immersive program ends this Saturday. So if you are interested at all, now is your time to sign up. And if you have any questions about it, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to connect with you. And if you also need support funding the program, we offer nonprofit discounts. We offer group discounts if you want to join with a group from your organization. And we also offer support in pitching this as a leadership development opportunity for you to get support and funding from your organization too, if that's something that's an option for you. So if you are called to it, but money feels like a barrier, please reach out to us, because we can help you find ways of problem solving that together. And Ariel, is there anything else you want to add about the program?
I mean, what I would say is that this program is kind of the fruit of a lot of labor that we have developed as a co-founding team that kind of pools all of our various skills in education, in theater, in organizational development, in conflict resolution, and just marries a lot of different different kinds of disciplines to really create a dynamic experience that deals with the nervous system. It deals with kind of introduces elements of nonviolent communication, that introduces elements of mindfulness, and kind of interweaves them into a really holistic approach to strengthening relationships. And it is really transformative. These are the tools that we've used to create a really healthy relationship. Obviously, it's always a work in progress, and there's always new challenges to deal with. But I think that adopting these tools into my life has created a completely different way of being in relationship and being at work, that has introduced a new chapter in my life. So I guess that's what I would say, and that it's really special to be able to share this with other people and see the impact that it's making. one thing we often hear is like, this has been amazing at work, but actually it's saving my marriage. We've heard this many times from many different people and clients who have been through the program. So really excited to share this with everybody.
Thank you. And I know we're at time, but for those of you who are still here and want to stay a couple minutes longer, since there were no questions in the chat, I want to close out by asking you to share. Do you want to share the story of how we went from co-founders to life partners from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like the story changes each time I tell it. I mean, from my perspective, um, I think that I think that for me, it started on your birthday, and I Mallory had a birthday coming up, and this was about it. This was maybe 6 months, maybe 6 months after we had started working together, and I realized at this moment that at this kind of point in our in our work relationship, that this partnership, the three of us, me, Katya, and Mallory, was going to be much different than any other work partnership, and that we would be um, really interwoven into each other's lives in a very deep way. And so I wanted to do something special for Mallory to kind of show 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 that I cared for her and that I wanted to, take care of her in this way. And I created a surprise birthday adventure. And I said, I got Katya in the loop, and I was like, and I sent Mallory a message like, pack an overnight bag for 2 days and show up here, and I'm going to pick you up. And we drove to a friend's retreat center, and basically had a little mini retreat for her birthday. And we were, had time in the fire, hiking, jumping in an icy cold lake, making all the foods that I knew were Mallory's favorites, which she didn't know that I knew. Um, and just really took care of her. And at the end of that night, we were sitting next to each other in front of the fire, and kind of, I think you had your head on my shoulder, and I don't know if I knew at that moment that we would be in a relationship, but I felt like that there was a sense of something really deep, and I had the sense that we're gonna spend our lives together making a relationship that's really special. Um, and I think that's when that 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 aspect, that feeling inside started to expand, and when I realized that when I didn't realize, but when the feeling started to expand inside. And then Mallory later just put her cards on the table, like a real G. Like, well, I guess I should pass it to you to tell that part of the story.
Well, meanwhile, I'm over here being like, wait. So after I ended my lost relationship, I took some time off. I took a 5-month sabbatical. I traveled all around India, and I spent a lot of time in meditation centers and yoga retreat centers. And I emerged from that with this idea of, the list of like, in the person who I really want to commit to for my life, they have to have all of these things. And some of them were really specific, like must come from a multicultural family, have grown up in a big city, but also loves nature, loves bike riding, loves food, loves dancing, just really. And it was so long. And I knew that no person could possibly fulfill this really detailed, specific list. And then I met Ariel through, working together. And I was like, wait, he literally checks off every single item on the list. This is insane. Like, how did the universe bring me the person who's perfect for me in the one role where I can never actually date him? So I felt this whole inner turmoil because I definitely thought, oh, well, we're co-founders. We can never be in a relationship. And, receiving this amazing, birthday surprise that was literally all the things that I love in such detail from someone who I felt like I didn't really know that well. And felt this incredible inner turmoil of feeling this pull, but also feeling so held back by my idea of what my life should look like, what my relationship with my business partner should look like, what, what I was, the way that I should be doing things based on all these inherited ideas. And so it was really a process over many months for both of us to untangle, what we've been told is the right thing to do by society versus what in our heart and soul is being called forward. And so it feels really powerful to be here today, sharing all of this for the first time and really embracing this kind of non-traditional path that we've chosen. And I want to close out this conversation by giving a huge shout out to Katya, our third co-founder, the original founder of Inheritance Project, who from the very beginning was the greatest support of our relationship, which has not always been easy to do in her position. And, unconditionally showed up for us with love and support and encouragement and helping us through working all of these things out, and really modeled what true leadership looks like, and being able to, hold space for really big changes, and to be really committed to, creating a business that truly comes from the heart, that honors the heart, and doesn't, need to conform to all these shoulds and ideas that we've inherited from society. So I want to send some love to Katya. She's currently out vacation with her family in Italy. So let's all send her some love and hope she's having a really beautiful, restorative time. I know we're a little over time. Ariel, is there anything else you want to share in closing comments?
Just that I think it's been such, in the beginning, I told myself, like, this is absolutely not allowed. You can't do this. And I think that it's reflective of the time that we're in, that I, over the course of that time was saying, like, we get to do this our own way. We're going to be making our business in a way that that feels and looks differently than others, in its structure and the equity that we share, and I think that it felt it wasn't an immediate yes but it felt like it was in alignment to do a relationship differently. And what's so interesting is that once we did get together, our business actually expanded greatly, and we started to meet all these other couples who were in business together. Like, I've never really met anyone who has a business any partners that have business together. And afterwards, we started meeting all these couples that had successful long-term businesses with healthy partnerships. So I found that was really interesting, and I think, to really following allowing space for the intuition to really to guide, and to allowing our hearts to guide us in our relationship, and in the same way that we allow our hearts to guide our business. And it's been such a blessing, and contributed to this being a very different kind of relationship than others in the past. So just really grateful to you for showing up with so much integrity in our life and work. And and I look forward to continuing to grow both of these, this life. I was going to say these two aspects, but really they're integrated. So look forward to growing that with you.
Yeah, same here. It's funny, when I left my corporate job, one of my intentions was to be more integrated in my life and not feel like I had a work self and a yoga self and a social self, but to feel whole. And then literally got thrown the most intense invitation into that integration possible. It's like, be careful what you wish for sometimes. But it's truly been an incredible journey, and we're just at the beginning. And this is the first of probably many conversations. So if you're still here listening, if there are any topics or things that you want us to touch on more in future conversations, please write them in the comments. We would love to hear what's of value to you, what's of service to you. And thank you all so much for being here and for joining us and for giving us the space to open up and share in this way. It's really been a joy and hopefully the first of many.
Thank you, everybody.